Hello, and welcome back, or welcome to the Water Ski Podcast. This is Matteo your host, and the goal of this podcast is to promote water skiing through interviews, conversations, themed episodes, whatever the content is. Just know that the love for the sport of water skiing is what fuels this project. That's also true for this week's episode, which is a recap of the 2021 competitive season that I had the pleasure to record with Trent Finlayson. Trent is, in my estimation, one of the most acute observers of the sport of water skiing for several reasons. Personality, he has been in it for a long time. He has worked at the Water Ski magazine in the past. So this combination makes it for a very acute and careful observer of the sport. And so I couldn't think of a better person to sit down for a little bit and just think back of this 2021 season, a season that had tremendous performance levels, very tight competition, lots of competitions, world records being beaten over the season. So it was a true pleasure and just plain fun to discuss the season with Trent. We recorded this last week, so basically the week after Miami Pro, which was the final pro event of the season. And certainly we start with that a little bit, but then we go back and think of all the tournaments and just some trends that we saw throughout the season. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I have quite the lineup of interviews that I will be releasing in the next few weeks. Some multiple part episodes as well. These are going to be long interviews, but fun one. We've been going deep with some of these skiers into their history, their approach. So I think you're going to enjoy it. So stick around. Tell your friends about the Water Ski Podcast and enjoy this 2021 recap episode with Trent Finlayson. Trent, first of all, welcome back to the Water Ski Podcast. Thank you for joining me for this episode. I am, as I told you, like off the record, what I really want to do with you is basically look back at the 2021 season of water skiing. We just finished last weekend. And before we start, really, I couldn't think of inviting a more acute observer of water skiing to do this with me. So thank you for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. It was an amazing season. It's you and your counterparts started talking about this idea of joining all these independent, if you will, private events and getting some sort of backbone to the whole thing. And I did not imagine, I didn't see what you guys saw. I didn't imagine that it was going to change the excitement and even the participation. I mean, the events were all so well attended, and I can't think. I've got to think back a long ways to a season that was more exciting. And this is one of the first ones I've watched, more as an outsider. More as a fan, and it was incredible, just by getting some unity or unifying these events, what it did to just the overall excitement, and I don't know if that lent to the results, to the level of skiing going so high, but this was a special season for sure.
Yeah, no, I'm happy that you started with that, like with the whole idea of Water Ski Pro Tour. I think, as you know, I'm part of this, but I also, I saw what we ended up seeing this year, but not nearly, I didn't foresee such a hype effect on people following water skiing, which I'm obviously very excited about. Any hype about water skiing, I'm stoked.
Me too.
So what is it that you liked? Was it like just the fact that you could go in one place and find information, the points, the storylines about the points?
Well,
What was it?
I mean, for me personally, I'm typically either I'm there or I have friends that are there. For me, I think making, and it was a brilliant idea, but making sure that webcasting, quality webcasting, wasn't an option. I mean, it was, if you're going to have an event tied to this tour, to me, that was far and away, that was the big one. I mean, every single event, and the majority were covered by Waterski Broadcasting Company, which we don't even, that's a whole nother show about, I mean, just what they're doing for our sport. And others were covered by, guys like Calvin Callum, who's doing an incredible job himself now when he isn't helping the broadcasting crew.
Yep.
But they were all covered, and you could see them all. You just didn't have that sense of them being in the dark, So I think number one, hands down, if you were going to lean, you could lean 90% of what changed the season was you guys or the Waterski Pro Tour, mandating coverage like that.
Yeah, and I think the first step, which we were all a little. Like, we knew it was the right thing, but we were hesitant to impose things, was have a webcast. Like, I heard so many times people telling me, like, if that tournament didn't have a webcast, did it even happen, right? And so that's what convinced us to say, okay, if you want to be part of this thing, you have to have a webcast. And I think in terms of the quality, I think the TWBC is setting the bar so high that either you want to get them or you want to get someone that is going to get really close to them, because you want your event to be showcased in the best way possible. And we've seen, honestly, a quality that I wouldn't have imagined even 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, and just, like almost an aside, but in keeping a topic a little bit, I mean, what that has done to the U.S. Nationals, because for as long as I've been here, and been involved with helping organize events, and it's always this. It was almost annoying. You heard it so much. How do we save nationals? How do we save nationals? How do we save nationals? As if nationals was, I hate that assumption that it was dead or dying. But if you're just going to follow into that narrative, how do you save nationals? You just did it. I mean, it lends just such a different level of It changes the level of the event. It makes it just so much more. It changes the level of relevance, is where I was going. Because again, people, that will drive attendance in itself, because all of us, whether it's me and you and someone like Will or it's their family, everyone wants to see the sport covered in this manner. They want to see themselves, or an amateur tournament like the Nationals, people want to see themselves covered in this manner. So, I think that would be the next step for USA Waterski is to come up with a similar structure that you guys did for the Pro Waterski Tour, in that part of your bid package to host US Nationals, webcasting is a requirement. They just set this whole new standard, these last 2 Nationals that have been broadcast like that.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, hearing you talk about the most attended tournament in water skiing worldwide, right? Because that's the U.S. Nationals. The AWSA Nationals are the most attended in terms of participation. That they are, how do we make it big? How do we make it better? And then it seemed that it revolves around showing it to skiers. To me, it reinforces, again, some of the motivations that we have behind Waterski Pro Tour. Like, I think on any dock around the world, we're going to be talking about how do we put water skiing on TV. But it seems like we were at a stage, or maybe still are at a stage, where people that water ski don't know how to follow water ski. Like, how do they 100%. Watch it? So I think we are starting to tackle that challenge.
Yeah, and I mean, attracting passive, the odd passive viewer is great too, but I mean, when it's, well, I mean, you just go back to a year ago when it's other water skiers, and some of these guys are ex-pro skiers, and others they've been doing it their whole lives, and they're all fumbling around trying to find results for some tournament held somewhere, it's so, I mean, if I can't find the results, not that I'm particularly tech savvy, but if I can't find the results, what chance does someone on the fringe of the sport, have finding it? So definitely that. So anyway, back to the original question, that's what, to me really just tipped this year in such a, such a dramatic fashion. It's just so much bigger than anything we've had in so very long.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm glad, someone like you who has been in the sport for a while is seeing it that way. Let's go to the specifics. Like there were primarily slalom tournaments covered, like that were part of the Pro Tour, but there was also like overall tournaments. There was 3 event tournaments, jump tournaments. I don't know that we should necessarily go chronologically, but let's start with one of the things that sort of surprised you or excited you about an event, let's say, in particular.
Yeah. I think, like, for me, it didn't surprise me, but I found it very exciting. There was a kind of a blend, but it was this ideal blend of the old guard just not going anywhere, and all these new kids, like, just realizing how, not even necessarily kids, but these new skiers just like realizing how good they suddenly have become, and believing in themselves, to the point where there's these just new people, like, getting on the podium and making finals. I mean, for me, you could start right at the last event. I mean, when there's an event that's attended by Regina Jaquez and Manon Costard, and someone else wins who's never, she's been on one podium before, but Elizabeth Montavon winning that tournament, that's the kind of stuff, like, I'm a huge Regina fan, and I can watch her win all day long, but that's when you think of the sport growing and the level of excitement around an event that was properly webcasted so people are actually watching, it's not just for the 40 people on shore. That was one of the moments for me. Her, so to sort of encapsulate that, these new up-and-comers, Elizabeth, Adam Caldwell at Malibu Open,
whoa,
Dane Mechler just everywhere,
right,
including his, I think that had to have been his first podium finish at a pro event at that last event of the season.
It was his first this year, yeah. Like I think he had a third at Malibu Open that I recall.
That's right.
But like, yeah, he hasn't done many podiums, which is surprising. I mean, obviously we know that he had an injury that kept him out during the summer, but someone like him who runs 41 at a runoff to make it in the world's finals, he's starting to make podiums.
Yeah, and I guess in keeping with that is like not just, because there's often the odd shakeup in an event, but just like the level of skiing, like how insanely good Dane Mechler is, like, so just back to the Miami Pro. I mean, that 41 of his in the finals, I mean, it was nothing other than it was nothing other than the excitement of the moment. Nothing was lacking. It was like, oh, like he's gonna do this again. So for me, yeah, that was kind of the thing. Jamie Bull, taking that last step to dominance, prominence, whatever, however you want to categorize it. There was just this little shift where, some people stepped onto the podium, and people that were just figuring that out stepped at the top of the podium and stayed there all year. So it was the storyline, in that regard for me was crazy exciting, and similarly, the storyline of the the old guard, like, getting better, like Will, I mean, I've been skiing with Will Asher since 2002 when he moved to Lafayette, Louisiana, and I mean, he's better at, I'm going to say 40 because he's awful close if he is, and he's better at 40 than he was at 30. Yeah. He's better at 40 than he was at 35, and that's just from a coach's eye, and just from, I'm just like, he's literally a better skier now than he was. And that's like super, super rare in an athlete. Like, typically you get more savvy, but you don't typically get better. I'm just like watching the way he moves. He's better. And then, Thomas DeGasperi, the same thing. Like, as strange as that seems, he's a better skier now than he was 5 years ago. So it was, for me anyway, that storyline was just that perfect blend of just new people stepping up and
Dane and then Will and like, those are the names that come to mind. Like Cole McCormick, Dane Mechler, like showing their prominence. Like they're starting to become, knocking the doors. I mean, I heard, what was it, last weekend in Miami, Cole got 3 of 41. I think according to backup score, he must have gotten like 4th or 5th, something like this.
Yeah.
And you could tell he was not particularly stoked. So that tells you that he's now knocking at the door, And then, yes, like Will and Thomas just still there. I mean, to me, in terms of, the old guard, to me, the masterpiece was Thomas 4 of 41 in the prelim at Worlds.
Yeah.
And I can give you a little nugget. Like we were training together as a team up to the Worlds. And in training, Thomas wasn't getting out of 3. Like not even close.
Yeah.
And by the time he skied in the prelims at Worlds, there had already been a lot of 3s. And it was late afternoon at Sunset Lake. So that tells you potential glare, and there was glare. And he just got to 3 ball and he turned and got to 4. Like that, to me, the masterpiece was with a piece of 3 you won in the final, because the runoff was 2. Yeah. So right foot forward at a pull to 3, the skis out at 3 might as well turn, right? But the decision making of doing this, as opposed to take the 3, because maybe it's better than 2.5, that was masterpiece. And in fact, that 4 or that piece of 4 made all the difference in the final. Because there was that pile up of 3.
For sure. That's what gave him but that's what allowed him to earn second place and avoid that amazing runoff for third place, which is just doesn't even sound like that could be a thing. But my goodness.
And then
then like we're talking to that story, but the other person, and he's not an up and comer, but we're talking about that person that took that last step into like, holy crap, like what a different level, Brian Detrick, right?
I was gonna say
running
him,
41 off. Yeah, I mean he ran 41 off 3 times in a single weekend at a non-pro event. But this was funny because there's skiers talk and there's a whole bunch of talk and like what's Brian gonna do and he's not gonna do this, he's not gonna do that, and from someone that's skied against him for a long time, like Brian's been around since early in the 2000s. I mean 2009. 2011, 9, 10, 11, I know I was skiing against him. And my simple response is Brian has always done what Brian can do. So when Brian was a 1 at 41 kid, that's what Brian did. It didn't matter whether it was a record event or whether it was a pro event. And then when he turned into a 2, then when he turned into a 3, remember he went like 2 years where he was not going to run less than 2 or 3. So when he started running it, I'm like, could be trouble for a lot of people because Brian just, I don't want to say calmly because he never looks that calm. He looks intense as can be, but Brian has always confidently is a better word, confidently done whatever Brian's capable of doing. So just back to that runoff for third place at Worlds. I mean, it's Brian Detrick, who's like obviously now one of the best skiers on the planet, but I mean, I always have this thing. If I was the last person in the world I'd want to have a runoff against would be Will Asher.
Yeah,
just
agreed.
In my mind, like just no one could wrap their brain around about what was required, and on the female side would be Regina. So for Brian Detrick it went to a double runoff, I believe, right? I mean, So Brian held his own against, in that scenario, the most frightening skier on the planet.
I mean, if you think that he skied 3 of 41 in the prelims, 3 of 41 in the finals, 5 of 41 to tie with Will for a second runoff for third place, and then again 3 of 41, and he didn't go home with a medal. I mean, this is insane water skiing.
Insane. This is the biggest jump in a long time. I mean, it just in that, there was a jump, I guess, we'll say 5 years ago, 6 years ago, where where like 3 at 41 was just the new 2 at 41, where it was just kind of the new standard, where it's like,
Right.
if you don't have a chance at running 3, there's a good chance you're not going to make any finals this year, you know? So there was just kind of that jump that happened, but this one seemed to go from 3 to 5 like overnight, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I think we saw a glimpse of that at Mastercraft Pro last year, where you had Thomas, Freddie, and Nate tying with 5 at 41 for the win, and then they had to run off. So already the end of last season gave us a glimpse of what, you know, the level might be now. And then this season, I mean, lot of high, like, tournaments with high scores, you know, really a lot of them, really. So Caldwell, you mentioned Caldwell. I mean, what the guy managed to achieve at Malibu Open. I mean, speaking again of 3 is the new 4, 2 is the new 3. He started with 3, and you remember how he did 3. I mean, with a one-legged zigzag, barely squeaking into the boat guides. And then 3.5, and then 4. You know, that was insane.
Absolutely, and again, there's just like this whole thing as an athlete where you know, I mean, it's too easy to say, you know, you suddenly believe in yourself, but there is a sudden shift where, you know, maybe everyone sees it their own way. Like for me, it's just as soon as you like believe in the outcome more than caring about the outcome, that's when you kind of take this shift. Because I mean, Adam's been amazing for a long time. I mean, I know the first time I skied against him would have been probably 2012 or so. There was a small cash event in Texas, and he was running 2 at 41 back then. You know, but it was just. Okay. Yeah, you know, but again, he showed up and ran 2 at 41, and everyone was like, "Oh, like," and you know, and he did it like that. It's like, you know, he looked different. He obviously skied a lot different, and he banged out a score. But it was probably a little closer to flash in the pan back then. Not to say he wasn't doing it every day in practice, but I mean, he just, you know, there was just this shift, and it's really interesting. Like you could see it in his demeanor, even, you know, like he just looked a little less tense. You know, at the U.S. Open this year, you know, he knew he belonged there, and he knew he belonged, you know, in the finals with all these guys, and there's just a little bit more ease about his approach, and definitely I'm not talking about on the water, but right. He just looks a little more, and even just talking to him at nationals in U.S. Open, he just had more of an ease about it, you know, like he wasn't trying to force it anymore, and that's scary as a competitor when you see, like, again, like Dane Mechler, he's no longer forcing it. He knows what he's capable of doing. But yeah, you know, Adam Caldwell was another guy that just, you know, made the season more. That's what these guys did. They made the season more exciting, you know. You know, guys my age, I mean, I appreciate seeing the guys that I grew up skiing against still doing it at this incredible level. But this new group of skiers, they definitely made the entire package just better to watch.
And it was a season of surprises. Just staying with Adam for a second, I think the two things that impressed me the most were, one, you know, skiing technique has changed, and you know, with the times, like I'm assuming it has done in the last in all the decades before us, and yet comes someone that sort of like redefines everything, or like, you know, proves all of your theories wrong. And I think Adam is one of those guys. Like, everyone has tried to calm down, to finesse, to be more like precision over power, and then someone like Adam comes where it takes, you know, 100 degrees out of his own side and makes it work beautifully. I mean, the 39s he ran at Malibu Open, which was challenging condition. I mean, it was great sight, obviously, but, like, you know, there was rain in the final, there was some wind in some of the stages of the tournament. He was waiting for 6-ball. Like, the guy was skiing, by all means, very, very well. So there was that. And then the other thing is, I think he's 39 or 40 as well. Like, he's around the Will Tigas age. Yeah,
I think he's like 5 years younger than me. So I think that's where he'd be, 39 or 40.
And in the last few years, he has been constantly improving. Like, so he started, you know, improving like late and a lot, you know.
Yeah.
So
and the interesting thing is too is like what's really interesting is it's obvious that he's improving because these scores. I mean, he slowed down. As soon as he was eligible to ski 34 miles an hour, he did, and then he was still dabbling at 36. So I guess my point is like often guys will get to that age where they're eligible to slow down, and then because they get a sudden surge or a sudden increase in buoy count due to the slower boat speed, they kind of stop exploring,
right,
and they get kind of stuck right where they were. But he obviously sped back up to 36, and I guess it's just a testament that he is still exploring and he is obviously still improving. Again, just another one of those guys that helped make the season what it was.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, one other guy that made, in my opinion, this season super exciting for a lot of reasons is obviously Joe Poland. I think the 2021 season, like, if I may say, went from him being an Instagram, like, phenomenon to him being, apart from a world overall champ, like a tournament phenomenon. And I think it started at the Masters, like at the Masters or even the Masters qualifiers, like 229 at Corey's to qualifying jump. Like this guy did an insane season.
Unbelievable. I mean, he was top seed going into the final at Masters in jump, correct?
Correct.
And this is, again, I say it, tongue in cheek, but I mean, this is like a trick skier that can run 441 and jump 230 feet. And you know what else and him, and along with Dorian Llewellyn, they just changed the dynamic, the excitement of overall skiing. And that's like no disservice to the people that came directly before him, like Pipe, Mirandes, and Adam Settlemeyer, but there's never been like this hotly contested. I don't even know. I mean, I've been watching pro water skiing since I was 8 years old. Like watching like the 79 Worlds. I had certain worlds on VHS and I just don't. I mean, there were lots of world overall titles that were won in dramatic fashion, but I don't think that this has ever existed. Where outside of Dorian slalom, I mean, Dorian can win tricks and he can win jump, and I mean he was a heartbeat away from making the final in slalom at the Worlds. Joel Poland, I mean, he can win jump, he can win trick, and I mean, he can see. I mean, he's good enough. He could have podiumed at slalom at the Worlds. Like they just they made it really, really exciting, and because they were like battling back and forth, they kept breaking the world overall record heading into the Worlds, and they made it something that for as long as I've been watching, I've never cared about it like this. And I guess it's because they're both young and they're both like cool kids, and they're just both they're not just overall skiers because they don't have a weak event. They're both guys that are battling, and vying for pro wins and for world championship wins. Aside from overall, it's. Joel Poland was, that's definitely, not only did he make the season, I mean, another one of these characters, I mean, he probably made Herb's Cup. He carved a little niche for himself in Seattle, man. Like even the wakeboarders were struggling to keep up with him.
Oh, yeah. No, it's funny. I brought Florian Part, one of the guys that skis with me, to the Junior Masters, and we met Massi Pifaretti, the wakeboarder, at Performance. And we were sort of chatting, and all he kept asking me was about the super mob, like the ski line 5 mob that Joel was. And he told me that some of the wakeboarders were going to go and try it out on a trick ski. So we kind of want to try to make this happen. I'm like, yeah, go ahead, try. And then mind you, this was May. I think he landed that in April. He put it in the run at Worlds in October. Like, so within the span of 6 months, he landed the trick, invented it, got it approved, went to Worlds, put it in the run. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, no, he's not. He's not. I mean, he's not right. And like, and the whole package too. I mean, just such a nice kid, and you know, yeah, no, that's again, like, never has overall, you know, an overall title, an overall world record, never has it been so exciting. Because again, it's usually one of those things where if you break a world overall record, that thing is going to sit on a shelf for a long time. But these guys were, you know, doing it every other weekend, Worlds included. I mean, Dorian at the Worlds broke the world overall record, but just not as much as Joel also broke it. I mean, it was broke twice that weekend.
Yep.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
No,
definitely one of the highlights of the season. Yeah.
And honestly, for different circumstances, you know, like, I think it also extended into the women's overall at the Worlds, because there you had, you know, a couple of injuries at play. Obviously, Regina couldn't do overall because of, you know, her ACL recovery.
Yep.
And Janina, who was seen as the favorite, crashed 2 days before prelims, so she wasn't 100%. And it created this very interesting, you know, obviously dynamic where there were 3 skiers, like namely Paige, Sasha, and Hannah, who were super close. So everyone was watching each event in women thinking, okay, who's going to get the overall this time, you know? And, you know, that sense you always have at overall tournaments where it's all going to come down to jump and everyone is going to be watching the jump. From being there, I can tell you it was ever present. You know, like ever present. Every jump, we were like, okay, is that gonna be enough? You know, like to for this skier to go above the other one. So no, overall, definitely a resurgence through, you know, sheer competition and improvement.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and then connected to that, I guess, is the trick event. You know, like. lot of high scores in tricks this year. If you want to stay with the Worlds, I believe the cut for men was 10.590. Yeah. That means there were 12 skiers who skied over 10.5. You know?
Yeah. And no, that's another event. I mean, you know, again with that's just it. You know, with this gift that the Water Ski Broadcasting Company is providing. I mean. I'm like, you know, I was an overall skier as a child, but, you know, I mean, I'm as big a slalom nerd as they come, and I mean, I missed neither the prelims nor the finals in tricks this year, because it was just that, like, wanted to see what was Joel gonna do, how is this gonna affect the overall title, what's Dorian gonna do, you know, and just again, you're right, the level when it's that deep, you know, and it's akin to slalom, you know, when the 2 at 41 was a massive runoff just to get into the final. It was similar to tricks, you know, well over 10,000 points just to make the final.
Yep, 10.5 over 10.5 to make the final. And I believe someone told me this was the first Worlds with a cut at 10 grand, which, you know, and then it was really 10.5. You know, I think there was a skier, I can't remember who he was, but there was someone who skied 10.5 and wasn't in because it was 10.590, like crazy level. And then just by the nature of the trick event, in the final, 10.4 was podium, right? So it's that taught me, and it was funny. I was talking about it with Corey there, and he said, "Well, that's just how tricks is. It's tough to explain, but like if everyone is standing up, everyone is standing up. If someone starts to fall, everyone starts falling, right?" Yeah,
and that makes sense, you know, because one person, you know, like a third of the way through the pack goes like, okay, like I'm gonna put my, you know, my most difficult run into play here because this is my one shot, and so if that guy falls, then the next two guys are like, man, I can actually lay up just a little bit, like as if 10.4 is laying up, but you know, so yeah, there's a lot more strategy there, you know, where, and you see it a little bit in slalom, and you would see it a little bit in jump, I guess, more as the conditions dictate. But yeah, that's exactly right. It just, a few things have to change, and then people start changing their approach, and it actually made that you know, that trick final, it actually made it a little more fun that there was, a little more fun to watch when there was just a few people falling, and then you could see people weren't doing the runs they were doing in the prelims, and it was exciting.
And that, I think one of the main themes this year in terms of tricks was the continuation of a trend that we started seeing in the women first a few years ago, namely younger and younger skiers started to win bigger and bigger tournaments, right? And obviously, one of the examples could be Jake making the podium at age 13 or 14 at the Worlds, at the Open Worlds, or simply, and I might be slightly off on this, but I believe the under 21 Worlds podium was all above 11 grand. So, you're starting to see younger men also starting to compete against the big guys. And I think part of it has got to be the speed. Like, I think after Pato showed us that you can do 11 hand tricks in 20 seconds, where we had 20 years of doing 10, now more and more skiers are getting faster and faster, and they're fitting an extra trick, which makes you fit a trick that is 300 points is the difference between 11.2, 11.5, and there you go. So the event is really, really continuing to evolve. To me, that's what the indication.
And I find that that one is, I just think is just so like revealing in terms of just how passion driven it is, because there's outside of a World's year, there's fewer opportunities to showcase what's going on, and that one, I've been feeling this way for the last 10 years though. Like, these guys are just getting, and this year was seemed like a larger step in terms of progression than previous, but they've been getting better and better and better for the last 10, 12 years with fewer and fewer tournaments every year. So it is fascinating though, just just how like you said, Jake Abelson at 12, 13 years old making an elite podium. It's crazy how good these guys are getting at such a young age.
Yeah. I think it's morphing a little bit. What I think it's a trend that obviously gymnastics showed decades ago, and then we started seeing it into sports like snowboarding, and then skateboarding, like the freestyle sports. Obviously, I hear, although I'm not super aware of younger wakeboarders, but I hear from people I know in wakeboarding that it's starting to be like that in wakeboarding as well. Like, there are 14-year-olds or people that, like, skiers that ski the junior masters, who some pros are happy that they're skiing the they're riding the junior masters and not the pro masters, And now it's getting like that in tricks. And going back to slalom for a second, there's also a young guy this year who showed some insane results, and I'm talking about Charlie, obviously. I mean, it's coming to slalom too, man. For sure. I mean, ran into 41, at a pro event early in the season. And how old is he? I believe he's 15.
Yeah, that would be right. I mean, I know he's not 16, so that one's really exciting. And I love watching him ski, because you can tell that he is, and I know it's a big part in Drew, and I think it's Andrew Bergman, but you can tell he's not been overcoached. Like, that's like, when I watch him, it just reeks of this kid, he understands the fundamentals, and you can tell he's been left to his own devices a lot, not to suggest that no one's helped him, or to step on anyone's toes that has, but whoever has been helping him has been doing it in such a manner that nothing looks fabricated about it. It doesn't, it's not as polished, but I think that's how you get incredibly good, is by giving someone understanding. Here's a few things that need to happen. here's a few things that help facilitate those needs, and then you just kind of like step back, and that's when I watch him, it just reeks of it. I'm like, this kid is figuring it out, in a large part on his own, and it's incredible to watch. It's incredible to watch someone that big and that light. Sorry, those are almost like oxymoronic, but someone that tall and visibly that light. It's interesting to watch his approach. And this is why I love slalom. But like, if you just put him next to Adam Caldwell,
exactly,
and you wouldn't make sense that there's no way that they were competing against one another on a relatively close playing field. I know Adam's got more on him at the moment, but then even just if you just watch them, both you guys run 38, and you would it's just dumbfounding to see how different those approaches are. I just went slalom nerd for a minute there, but anyway, yes, Charlie Ross. It was really it was interesting to watch, and again, like that's, if you ever want to just see like what's really important, like watch someone like Adam, and then watch Charlie, and then when you start drawing those parallels, that's when it comes a little more clear on what what's truly important in terms of mechanical or technical approach.
Yeah. If you find commonalities between the two, those seem to be things that you should be keen in, because at a first, second, and third glance, you watch them ski, they don't look like they're doing the same sport. But clearly they are doing something that works, and whatever it is that they have in common, that seems super priority to focus on for your own skiing. And I like what you said about, like, I fully agree with you in terms of overcoaching not happening for him, but I think he speaks even more at length of like the ability of his coaches not to do so. And I'm 100%. Speaking personally, like I'm young in the coaching profession, and I know that I have to resist that tendency, because you never know with like my own tendency of wanting to correct things that don't look right or I believe they're wrong, because you don't know how they're going to play out in the long run,
I know. And so on that, like, I mean, you're right. It's a difficult one to avoid, because often it's being, solicited, almost begged for, like, why did this happen? Why did this happen? And it's like, well, A, who cares? But B, why do you think it happened? Like, right. It's easy to get stuck in the details, because it feels, it can seem so fruitful for a moment, but again, you watch someone like Charlie and you just see this stripped down approach, and I guess that was maybe more my point. Not that he hasn't been coached, but they, and I believe it's true. And Andrew, they've done just an incredible job of just letting him figure it out. Yep.
Yeah, providing input, but then also letting the skier go, which, if any coach is listening to this, I think it's something we all should strive to do.
Yeah. I think the other, there's nothing wrong with being stuck on Worlds, because that was the most exciting tournament I've ever seen in my life. I think something that really stood out at Worlds was Whitney McClintock. That, that's going to be one of those iconic crashes that, people are going to be watching 20 years from now. You think of, there's a few crashes that always seem to come up. One was like John Swanson. I think it was at Shreveport. It was Indianapolis. It was at one of the early 90 tour stops, and that one comes up all the time. And that fall she took in the prelims at the Worlds was, it just was frightful. And it was just such a reminder of, like, holy shit, like this, as easy as this looks, as easy as she makes it look, as easy as Nate glides through 41, like, things only have to change by a degree or two, an inch or two, and it's like game over. Literally lights out. It was horrible. It would be akin to getting hit by a car. It was hard to watch.
Yeah. I was skiing. I was scheduled to ski 3 skiers after her, because I believe she was one before last or last skier of the dock at the World's Prelims, and then I was like third of the dock Series 3. And I remember, like, you know, having to step aside for a second because the intensity of it all was high. And then the thing that shocked me was it seemed like there was nothing she could have done to prevent that type of crash. Like, it happened in such an instant that she didn't really have time to move her arms sort of to protect herself. There was none of that.
No, and when you imagine, like, that's what's, again, it's like a testament to how amazing these skiers are, because I mean the mistake she made at one was a mistake of inches, and that's a place that she has been literally, I mean, thousands and thousands and thousands of times. So she knew where she was, you know.
Yeah.
As in she could not have been more familiar with, you know, as in there, nothing completely out of sorts happened, you know, like she moved into load before the boat was there to pick her up, and she ended up just, you know, that little bit of separation, that little bit of, you know, shoulder down, and it was just like, it was inches away from where would have been no problem and probably not even alarming to her.
Yeah.
So it's a testament to, like, I mean, these guys are really, and girls are, they're literally, they're that in tune with their movement. We are talking about, you know, centimeters, inches.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, and it added, I mean, you know, it's horrible, but it added to her, I don't want to say added to the tournament, because no one wants to see their friends get hurt, but it will have added to her legend in the end, you know, and I mean, I know there's potential that she has a little eye damage, and I sincerely hope she's fine. And I do believe she is, but I mean, it just added so much, like, drama, and your heart was broken, and you were worried, and you was just like, holy shit, this could not get more real. And that's, you know, as a fan of any sport, that's, I mean, that authenticity is what you're looking for. You're just like, oh, I mean, there's blood, and she's crying, and her children are there, and you're just like, holy, it was just so hard to watch. And it was, again, it's like the fact that in, you know, a few hours, you know, whatever, 30 hours later, she was able to put her ski on and go back out, and you're just like, oh, you know, that just, you know, I know she's got a lot of fans, but I mean, that had to have just increase the people that are rooting for you. Because I mean, I know I was jaw on the floor. I could not stop watching. I mean, I was just so happy she went out there and in the final, and from her opening pass, you could tell she was very hesitant, and when she decided to turn around, you know, went around one ball at 35 and just, no, not today. I was just like, thank you. Like, thank you for going back to the dock. Thank you for skiing. Like, it made me such a fan. I just was blown away by it.
Yeah, no, I think if anything, like it added, or at least it improved the intensity of the World Championship. So, like, for those of you that watched the World Championships on the webcast, or you were present on venue, that's just one of the, unfortunately, you know, painful demonstrations, but that of the intensity of the Worlds. Like, I mean, this is someone who had a comeback season, was high of a win 2 weeks prior, and a very hard win, because, you know, there was a tie with 2 at 41, and she went in a runoff with what 2 weeks later ended up being the world champion and beat her. So, like, you know, she was on a climb up, and this is, you know, obviously Whitney, 2 times world champion in slalom. I mean, this was just one of the examples of the intensity of the Worlds. I have
truly is.
Stay with the women. I have one that to me jumps into my mind. So, you know, when we think about dominance in water skiing, I guess because slalom is the one event that the vast majority of water skiers do, we always think, you know, Regina and Nate. But to me, the true dominance in the sport right now is Jacinta Carroll in women's jump.
Oh, yeah.
And the thing beyond her world record at the Mastercraft Pro and the win, to me, there was a moment. So in the prelims at Worlds, I think she went like 57, 58 meters. And then the third jump, she passed. Now, there was a great shot from the TWBC where basically she was lined up in the middle of the camera on shore and the jump. And so Jacinta clears, like she jumps the wakes, akin to say Freddy Krueger. And as she lands the wakes, the tips of the skis are going straight to the side curtain. Like there's no way that those skis are going to be on the red.
Yeah.
And yet, for a fraction of a second, she holds. And then, of course, lets go and passes, and you can see her being upset, you know? So, to me, that split-second decision of, like, what if this is the cut? To me, like, that sanctioned her as the best jumper, female jumper of all time. I mean, it was such a crazy moment, you know? Like, she gets out, and you see the tips are just going for the gray, not for the red. Like, there's just no way. Even the left ski is going on the gray. And yet she just holds for a split second, like, oh, maybe. And then no.
Maybe.
You know?
Yeah, because that was the, you know, and again, like, I mean, I'm sure most people listening to this are probably in the same boat. I mean, we're kind of nerds about this. I mean, so leading up to the Worlds, you know, I mean, it's the topic of daily conversation. Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? And that was part of the storyline that I was seeing, you know, envisioning unfold would be, you know, for her to get this, you know, this milestone 200-foot mark at the World Championships. And I'm sure this speaks to exactly that moment you're talking about where she lands off the second wake with visibly zero chance of getting on the ramp. But still, just let's let this play out for a moment because I don't want to let this thing go.
Yeah, no, I think I don't know if recklessness is the right word, but there's clearly something that the very top jumpers in the history of the sport have or had that is just so rare, right? Yeah. And to me, that you also have jumpers who have had it and weren't able to use it to their advantage and become on the top of the sport. But clearly that to me was an indication of like, wow, she's thinking about taking that jump, you know? And the angle is right. Like we can all see from here, there's no chance. Unless she has some type of ability of going on the opposite direction of the boat. So no, I mean, Jacinta showed up to the US, akin to other Australian skiers under difficult circumstances, you know, like the COVID restrictions there have been really strict, and came and won Malibu Open and won the Worlds and won Mastercraft Pro with the new world record. I mean, I don't know that there's a clearer indication of dominance than that, you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I mean, it's been, has it been 6 years since she didn't win a tournament she entered? Longer?
Yeah, even more. Like, yeah, I
8
think
years. Yeah, I mean, it's
a lot.
It's wild. Yeah,
it's wild.
And it's not. Well, I mean, I guess if you're going to go on a 6-8 year run, it's obvious that you're you know, heads above everyone. But it's like, you know, she'll often win by 20 feet. But the cool thing, and again, in an event with limited opportunity to showcase, I mean, it's pulling the other girls upwards, just like Nate did in 2010.
Precisely.
Yeah, I mean, Lauren Morgan jumped over 180 this year. Brittany Greenwood jumped over 180 this year. So it's like, okay, like I mean, it has that effect, right?
Hannah is nearing the 190 if she hasn't gotten the 190. So yeah, you absolutely. The crazy thing is that the gap is still 20. You know, like, so the scores have been going up. But it seems like she's also been improving.
She's going up at the same rate.
At a level where, I don't know, like we were all talking about 200 in the women. Is it ever going to happen? Well, she was knocking at the door for a couple of years, 3 years, and then he finally did it at the last jump event of the year. Well, jump, do we want to talk about Freddie's win at the Masters? Because, I mean, I think it's such a monumental moment that I don't know. I will let you start because I don't know that I have the right words. I'll just follow you on this one.
Well, so which number was it? It was
So I believe it was 14, which I believe ties
one more than Andy. Oh, ties. Okay. Yes. Yeah. No, I mean, I guess, like, you know, in thinking about talking today with you about this, it was just how I mean, it's how amazing it is that Freddie is just still Freddie, you know, like he's still, you know, I mean, he has to be 45 years old, and he's doing a kid sport, and he's still doing it at this level. You watch him at the Mastercraft Pro. I mean, he's still good enough that he can on days do one jump and straight back to the dock. He's won this thing. I think, I know that was a pretty emotional, win from at the Masters to, sort of, you're etched in stone at this point, you're alongside, and if you're alongside any of Mapple's records, you're here for the, for the entire history of the sport. It's like, it's Wayne Gretzky kind of stuff, where, you can go down the list, of some of the most relevant people, and you'd have to triple their wins to get to a Freddie or a Mapple. And I think Worlds was probably the most interesting. Men's jump in that regard was very, very interesting at the Worlds.
Wow. Yeah.
Just because you kept, obviously, Ryan Dodd had been off the, not off the water, but out of tournament scene for a full year. Mastercraft, all the way, the whole calendar year up until the World. So, that was basically 12 months. And what the Worlds means to Canadians. And so you had that going, but, you still were just waiting and watching. Freddie ended up third.
Yep.
Correct? Yeah.
Correct.
But in the finals, you were just waiting and watching because you're like, well, it's Freddie's he's gonna go Freddie here in a minute, and it was interesting. Like, it was interesting and kind of heartbreaking at the same time, where and I just we worked together and friends and so I knew leading up to the event that he wasn't. I had been told that he wasn't jumping the way he would typically be jumping. He didn't have the feels kind of thing. So, and again, we keep going back to, how the Worlds is just a different beast in terms of the pressure and the intensity. And so what I thought was interesting, was he's never happy unless he wins, but you could still, it was sort of like him and Will both got third. And to watch them, you were both like, okay, you could tell that on that day they were okay with it, which I just think is, there's just so much to be said about the quality of character and how much you truly love the sport, where it was like, maybe a 25-year-old Freddie wouldn't have been as cool with it, nor would a 25-year-old Will or a 26-year-old Will, but it just shows their love for the sport, their respect for the sport, the respect for the people that beat them on that day, and I just thought it was kind of cool. Where for a moment you was like, kind of heartbroken for Freddie, but then to watch him, you're like, oh, he's okay with this today, like it's,
right.
It's
I think that's just the humility that greatness gives you. It's such a powerful thing that it's tough to experience because not everyone achieves that levels of greatness, like it's normal. We've all had successes here and there where you feel on top of the world, and then something else happens and you feel, like absolute anger, but they got to a different level. And then, men's jump at the Worlds, like I would say the whole season of men's jump, you didn't really know where it was going to go, even at the Masters. Looked like, is Freddie going to, pull it off? Or is Jack going to be jumping, like the big one? Is Joel going to confirm? And that seemed to be the thread of the whole season in men's jump. And then we got to Worlds, and Ryan was back, but Ryan hasn't skied an event in a year. Like, that has got to affect anyone, So there was all this uncertainty, and I think it made the men's jump final at the World super interesting,
Truly.
You had Dorian and I think Dorian was top seed, yes, and then Joe was right before him. And they're gonna follow up Ryan and Freddie. Like, are they gonna make it? It was so many questions.
Yeah, it was essentially unscriptable. Joel had that, high seeding into a finals, if you think back to the Masters. But, Dorian, went from very, very good to great this year. Like, I mean, all of a sudden he's like, so you're like, well, is this going to be the one? Like, he's going to win overall and win jump as the top seed kind of thing. Like, there was no way you weren't going to script Freddie and Ryan being the last two skiers off the dock. That's just the way it was going to be. And to watch that prelims unfold, it was okay. Ryan hasn't skied a tournament in a year. Freddie keeps sliding out. Like, what is going on here? And again, and it wasn't like it wasn't gifted to the younger crew. They took it because they went far. So it was a
Taylor went over 68. Taylor went over 68, didn't make the podium. There's a lot of skiers that have been skiing well this year, and it made it super exciting. Like, you didn't know on any given day in jump who was gonna be on top. Jack won Malibu Open last of the dock, second jump out to the dock.
Yeah.
That's a big win, and everyone was there except Ryan, of course, but everyone was there, and he dominated. So super interesting jump season. I guess one of the things before we go to next year, I think one of the things I want to hear from you, just maybe one event. Let's get out of Worlds for a second. One event where you saw something that, I don't know, inspired you, made you think differently. Anything you noticed at one particular event, even earlier this year or in the middle of the season?
Yeah. Well, so I'm gonna get kind of stuck on the same things, but it was seeing how truly good Dane Mechler is. And I don't even mean running 41, and I don't even mean podiuming or running the fours and stuff here, but whether I hate to say that he understands it, he executes incredibly well. When people get hung up on the details of the stuff that doesn't matter, they're like, look what he does with his arms on the head change, and I was like, no. That's not it at all. It's like his ability to. He always and with anyway, we're not going to go there, but he always seems to know where the boat is, where the load is coming, and his ability to always move in the appropriate direction. Like he's rarely static, he's rarely defensive. He's incredibly good. Like, if I think, and that's kind of like a slalom nerd response to a really big question, but it's profound to me. If you want to learn something really important about slalom, just watch Dane from the moment he hooks up or the moment he aligns with the rope, the move he makes from there to the first wake, and then that's everything you need to know about slalom. Or at least everything you need to know about or at least everything you need to know about why Dane's so good. Whether that's instinctive or whether it's it's a designed approach, or however he's sort of scratched the surface to it, or actually plowing pretty deep lines now. He's that move there is insanely good, and I talk about how Will's improved and how Thomas has improved, and they've improved in that exact same facet of their skiing. Like the move they make at that point has just gotten continuously better. What stood out for you? What was that? For me, so I guess I already said it. The one that just pulled my heart out was watching Whitney take that fall. That one was, it summed up the intensity of the tournament, and it was that was a powerful one.
Yeah, no, I think that it was a very general question. I didn't have anything in mind or, expecting you to say anything. Just curious to see what that brought up. But yeah Dane. And it's interesting how it sort of reinforced that despite not being part of the core of the ski season. He was out for months. He came here to say hi because he was in Europe during the Pro-Am, not being able to ski the Pro-Am with a finger that was, supposed to be the size of two fingers. Yet he at the beginning he skied the two tails of the season and showed, why you should be fearing every time he shows up to an event.
Probably another one then. I guess if you're just talking about, and it's just tough to get off the worlds, but I mean watching Jamie win that world title,
Yeah.
I mean that's essentially you don't want to call it her home site because she's staunchly Canadian. But I mean it's one of her home training sites. It's her training partners, and that is her family away from home is Jack Travers and that his family and staff and just to watch her like rise and and she she had to take it from Regina, and that's she had to take it from the best skier, the best women's slalomer in the history of the sport, and albeit injured, but hungrier than ever because she was recently injured. So I mean that was that was we covered this at the start, Jamie, taking that final step into however we want to define this current stage, but that was an emotional one to watch too. That was another one that got at your heart a little bit.
Yeah, and honestly, I think something that has been in the back of everybody's mind, but maybe I hadn't heard it from anyone, is how Jamie is like has a very similar, like right foot forward, like there's a lot of similarities between her and Regina, just like a huge age gap, and like a different generation of skier really, and yet there are a lot of similarities. So you're like, okay, when is it going to be that Jamie will get on top, and if you follow the last 5 years of women's water skiing, you could see the trend. You could see that she was climbing up and up and up and up. And I think maybe the first real like strong indication we had, I believe, was 2 years ago, her and Regina head-to-head finals at Malibu. Yeah. Remember, it was 2 years ago where you had, I think it was Sam, Jamie, Regina, and there was another surprise there, and Brooke maybe. Like,
I think you're right.
And they all did like 4 or 5 at 39 to be top 4. So it was like, okay, there's the women's field is expanding, and Jamie's climbing the ladder pretty strongly. No, definitely a huge moment. And then you already saw it at Malibu 3 weeks prior, where she pulled to 3 at 41. You're like, ooh, okay, first other woman apart from Regina to get a piece of 3, maybe, super strong season. I believe she didn't any tournament she entered this year, her worst was second. I believe that's the type of season she had, But no, a lot of key moments this year. So next season, how do you see it? What do you see some of the trends? I know it's a hard question, but like, what do you see happening next year?
I think I think if we're just going to say a little slalom centric, I think the most interesting thing early is going to be what is Regina going to do? Because I mean you see her walking around the site right now, and it's like, oh man, maybe you just need to just sit this out, because like she's limping, and you watch her on her ski, and I mean she looks like, and maybe if it's not pain, it looks like pain, and if it's not pain, then it's limited mobility, which happens when she's wearing a brace and she's got swelling, and and I mean what she was able to achieve was amazing. What's going to be interesting though is, okay, so she's going to be able to step aside, finish the rehab, which is, if you've ever done your ACL, you know it's not done at this point. So when she finishes the rehab, and I kind of know from experience, when you go through that process, and knowing Regina like I know, she's going to be even stronger, fitter. She's going to check every box. So I mean, I just think her level, and then her hunger for next year. I think watching how that's going to unfold early will be interesting, and so does she show up and just win the first 5 events of the year like nothing ever changed, or did this, the moment when she was gone and some new people get a little confidence, and Jamie's obviously found out that she is the best skier on the planet as of today. Was that going to be enough to keep them there, or does Regina come back stronger, even more ready, and just picks up like nothing happened last May? I think that'll be an interesting one to watch as things get going.
Yeah.
Then I think on the other side is, how long until Dane runs 41?
Right.
Again. How long till Brian runs it again? Because
are they gonna get their first pro win? Because like those are 2 big names. Like, I mean, in my opinion, next in line to have a pro win.
Yeah, and Adam Caldwell turns one more buoy, and then all of a sudden, is he going to run 41?
Right.
Or get a win? So there's just it's already. Just because this season ended as high as it did. There's and there are just simply more events than ever. There's more opportunity for someone to take that last step, whether it's Brian or Adam or Dane.
Yeah. I think those are the type of things that I think a lot of listeners are waiting for next year. And I think going back to the beginning of our conversation, I wonder if like a well promoted system of points and tournaments and tour will add up to the storylines, right? Like, there's just so many skiers. If you look at the top 3, 4, 5 of the men and women slalom in the Pro Tour, it almost feels like there's sense to it. I don't know how to explain it, but like I think, you see, I don't know, say men. I think it ended up being Nate, Freddie, Will, right? Mm-hmm. And then in the women, I believe it was Jamie, Regina, Manon. So like you think of the best water skiers in the world, and a tour that gives consistency, like where in order to win, you have to be consistently good at half of the events that are in the calendar. Well, it gives another strong measure of who's really at the peak of our sport, Yeah.
Yes.
And
I think that one
break through.
I think that one was not to suggest it wasn't done correctly, but I think that one was, or maybe just because next year will be year 2 and we're going to be more accustomed to it. I think watching that tour race play out will make a little more sense, or be a little more impactful, perhaps. Or perhaps it'll be a $10,000 bonus, but right. Like it was like watching it play out, and you were seeing all the scenarios and all the what ifs at the Miami Pro, and I think maybe just because we weren't talking about it enough during the season, that it was maybe a little harder to get to really get behind it. But again, year 2, maybe it's going to be something that's followed and talked about a little bit more through the season. But considering that, you don't have to go, you go back, less than a year, and this was really just something that was getting talked about. So as impactful as this first season was, as the Water Ski Pro Tour, season 2, season 3, you're already excited, because again, this was an idea, less than a year ago.
Yep.
Let alone something being actually implemented. Yeah. So
roughly 11 months ago, that's when we started talking about it. So so far it's been going really well, I would say. I think more down to the specifics, I think one of the things that excites me to see is, I want to word it well, but I think it's something along the lines of is Robert Pigozzi going to be back on top? And I say that with all the caution, that I can say, because it sounds really bad the way I phrased it, but we're speaking of a guy who won 2 pro tournaments in 2018 at a tremendous season. 2019 also, and then for whatever reason, like has been showing up to tournaments, but just not, skiing as good as he can. So I'll love to see what 2022 has in store for him, because again, he is young, he's aggressive, he has round 41, like he checked all the boxes of being there with the names that we talked about this year. I really look forward to see what 2022 has in store for him.
Me too.
And and then obviously next year, no Worlds, but obviously a lot of pro tournaments. And then one of the ones that a lot of people don't talk about is World Games, which will be in the US, in Birmingham. Just to give a bit of context, that's an Olympics for sports not at the Olympics. Let's call it this.
Fair.
And only one skier per gender per event is invited from each nation. So there will be one man slalom skier from the US, one man slalom skier from Canada, one man slalom skier from Italy, and so goes for women and tricks and jump. And I find that it's an event that happens every 4 years. It was supposed to happen this year, but then with COVID, it got postponed to 2022. So it always makes it for a very interesting event, because at the end of the day, the best skier of each nation is a really good skier, So I always find it like a very unpredictable and fun tournament to watch. And then Pan Am Games next year, or no?
You know what? There should be a Pan Am Games. There's a Pan Am Championships. There should be a Pan Am Games next year.
Is it every 2 or 4 years? Do you know?
Oh, so yes, no. The games are every 4 years.
Oh, okay.
Championships are every 2 years.
Every two, okay.
Yeah,
so I believe the last ones was maybe 2 years ago. So maybe we have to wait a little longer for games.
Yeah.
But no, great season ahead next year. Who knows what's going to happen with Masters? How you're going to make it in? I guess we'll figure it out this winter.
Yeah, I mean, what I've been hearing is that they're going to use the same format as they did. That they're going to adopt that as the new standard format.
Do you think for pros only or for juniors as well?
I've unofficially heard that both.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I know there's been a lot of discussion this year about, pros and cons of that, but it's undeniable that it created a lot of excitement in those 3 weeks,
Yeah, it did.
So we'll see what happens in 2022 about that. Look, it was the first season of water skiing after a very tough year that really had a butchered season and a bit of a scattered water ski world in 2020. So it was cool to see. Obviously, selfishly, I'm hoping that more pro tournaments will occur in Europe next year, like we had 2 years ago and prior.
For sure.
Because at the end of the day, a lot of the flags that you see on the rankings are European, so it'd be cool to have tournaments here as well. But no, I think this year was in a lot of ways almost a renaissance in water skiing.
I agree. Yeah, because you had said this was the first year of the Pro Water Ski Tour after a difficult previous year. But then you could even just go a little broader. This was the first year of a tour after 15 years without a tour. Not to say that there weren't people putting in work and putting on amazing events, but it's this solidarity and this unifying backbone of all the pro events it's had, to be honest, it was more impactful than I imagined. In my mind, I was like, well, we're going to rearrange the points and we're going to have a website, and but then when you add the mandatory webcasting into it, and then I think it did fuel the whole season in a manner that I wasn't anticipating that it would. I do think that in part that's why there was just more excitement around all the events, and excitement fuels performance, and performance fuels excitement from the spectators, vantage point. And yes, it's an impactful season, and I think it's I think it's like I think it's going to be. I think it is powerful in that because now we're finally like I get sick of hearing like we need to be on TV. I'm just like, well, no, that's not what needs to happen. That's we got to let go of this 90s ideal. People don't watch TV in the same manner. That's for if it's off the table forever, it doesn't make any difference. We need to do what we do well, and like you guys have done, find a way to put it in front of people who care. So yeah, bravo.
Well, I don't know if we could have ended any better. Trent, it was super cool and a privilege to comment the just finished season with you. And
my pleasure.
Yeah, well, congrats on the podcast. You guys on Spraymakers are doing an amazing job. Season 3
Thank you.
Next year?
Oh yes, 100%.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we're gonna. Chris and I've been already bouncing some ideas and storyboarding a little bit. We're gonna be bringing in. It's gonna be the same format. It's gonna be the nuts and bolts, but we're gonna be bringing in guest spots for additional interpretation of what it is. Or additional interpretation of the way that I see things and Rossi sees things. So I think this is going to be really interesting. Other coaches, yes, but other skiers that are currently implementing what it is we're talking about. But they're doing it at the highest level at the peak of their career. So yeah, we're gonna get some additional voices in and still, because sometimes you just you hear things through a slightly different lens and it can be a little bit more impactful, and it'll be fascinating for me to talk to more more skiers that I don't get to talk to on a regular basis.
Awesome. No, well, that's another thing to look forward to for 2022. Trent, thanks a lot. This was fun.
Very welcome, man. Enjoyed it. Thank you.